Ladies and gentlemen, I am SidAlpha. As is always the case with such videos, I do like to preface these with the following sentiments. There are a lot of ways a developer or a company might find themselves on the list of the Dirty Devs. It is called Dirty Devs as a series, as it originated with purely indie games, where the development typically consists of one or of a few individuals with no corporate structure or publisher behind them. So, as so many people do tend to misconstrue this and make blanket assumptions, the current situation with CD Projekt Red has led me to title this video, and likely more involving such situations, as Corpo Rats in honor of the Cyberpunk universe. Granted, I'm sure people will still misconstrue my intent anyways, and some have already accused me of bandwagoning, which they're more than welcome to do so. Now, in this instance, and what I intend on showing to you all here, is a deliberate and concerted effort to both lie directly and engage in lies of omission in order to protect a game that is fundamentally broken and largely unplayable on its console versions, as well as bending to the will of China, and in the so doing engage in exceptionally anti-consumer behavior. Because there's a general rule that was not upheld here. Do not lie to your customers, and do not deliberately mislead them. Now, I have a great deal to say on that matter, but I'll save that for the end. There's another thing that I don't typically state openly, as I generally feel it should be taken as a given, but I will say this plainly and in no uncertain terms. This video, and the decisions made behind it, should in no way be an indictment or criticism of the rank-and-file developers who work for CD Projekt Red. These people are not the decision makers. They're not the ones that engaged in these behaviors. And if anything, the employees of CD Projekt Red have been unduly placed into the crosshairs because of the words and deeds of the company's management. Do not harass the developers. Do not threaten them. Do not ridicule them, because ultimately they shoulder no blame, nor should they. In particular, I'm speaking to those individuals that have issued threats of personal harm or of deletion to CD Projekt Red's developers. They don't at all deserve that, and those that would issue such threats are the scum of the earth. The development time of Cyberpunk 2077 varies depending on who you listen to. If it's CD Projekt Red management, they'll say it's been in development for 5 years. If you listen to CD Projekt Red staff, it has been in development for 8 years, suffering multiple redesigns in the process, and historical data will certainly back up the assertions of the 8-year development process, if not longer. The Cyberpunk 2077 was officially announced in May of 2012 during the summer conference, where CD Projekt Red themselves stated that they had already been working on the game for, quote, a few real-time years. And don't take my word for it, it's right there for everyone to see.
Until not so long ago, we had just one team, but I'm really pleased to announce that since quite some time, we have a second team, and I'm talking about it for the first time today. And the second team is based on Witcher veterans. So these are really seasoned developers, the guys who were working on Witcher 1 and Witcher 2. Actually, they were working quite a few years on them. So if we would gather the nights they spend at the office, it would be a few real-time years they spend on this project. They're really seasoned developers.
So where did this 5-year development timeline originate? Well, from what I can gather, that came from an interview that lead animator Maciej Pietras, I know I'm butchering that name, my apologies, had with a French games journalism site, where he said, "We officially announced Cyberpunk 2077 in January 2013 with a teaser trailer. But since we needed all the studio power to move forward and complete The Witcher 3, production of Cyberpunk 2077 remained on hold. It was only after the release of the expansion Hearts of Stone that the whole studio really started working hard on Cyberpunk 2077, that is to say, in 2014. Although that could have been a misremembrance on his part, as Hearts of Stone was released in October of 2015. So it is possible that after the initial announcement in 2012, they'd opted to place the game on hold in order to devote more resources towards The Witcher 3. But it seems likely that they're claiming a shorter development cycle due to initial efforts being completely scrapped outside of potentially some story concepts. So while development may well have been held or paused until October 2015, as Pietras has claimed, it was likely only part of the story. And throughout that development cycle, CD Projekt Red has seen its share of controversies, with the Glassdoor reviews from former employees being highly critical of the studio to the point that it prompted a formal response from the company in October of 2017, which was little more than a CD Projekt Red is awesome with multiple firms' self-pats on the back.
Last night, self-5.
There is also the topic of crunch, which I really won't go into very much detail here, where it is a very prevalent and pervasive point in terms of a great many gamers expressing indignation on behalf of developers undergoing crunch periods, and also with contradictory claims in regards to it. Now, it is claimed that the CD Projekt Red team voted on whether or not to engage in crunch hours, where Bloomberg reported in September that, per an internal email, CD Projekt Red informed their staff of mandatory 6-day work weeks. It was further stated within that article from an employee that CD Projekt Red, quote, "The company hasn't lived up to its word." The employee, who asked not to be named discussing private information, said some staff had already been putting in nights and weekends for more than a year. Which, this mandatory crunch flies in the face of what Marcin Nowinski had told Kotaku in a 2019 interview, where it was stated that even when the studio asked them to work on nights and weekends, it's not mandatory. A definite implication that the company held a policy of not mandating crunch, although it is worth noting that such a policy was never clearly stated. And in addition to those two controversial subjects, CD Projekt Red had come under fire for delaying the game a total of 3 times, the most recent of which sparked widespread outrage, and some exceptionally disgusting individuals even going so far as to issue threats of deletion, an act which should never be considered as justifiable by any stretch of the imagination. The writing was already on the wall and should have been paid more attention to by games critics when review codes were released to journalists and the embargo stipulations were made clear. Now, granted, it is no surprise that journalists were not at all willing to bring this to light, as doing so might see them blacklisted from receiving future review copies. However, thankfully, one larger YouTuber, SkillUp Gaming, spilled the beans on that, where he stated openly on Twitter that CD Projekt Red's embargo required all reviewers to only use B-roll footage provided by the company or to use trailer footage, which carries with it the severe implication of the company wishing to hide or mask any of the game's glaring issues, which speaks to my mind of a deliberate attempt to prevent prospective buyers from learning what the game's playable state was really like. Now, in addition to that, CD Projekt Red only provided review copies for PC. No PS4 or Xbox One review copies were distributed, which is where the lie of omission comes into play. CD Projekt Red knew full well the game was, for all intents and purposes, unplayable on most consoles, and so they attempted to hide that fact. And the issues that have been faced by console players on the PS4 and Xbox One have been horrible graphics, extremely low frame rates, of which some reviewers have stated that the frame rates were below 20 FPS, frequent crashing, and an exceptional number of bugs. The issues with the console versions of the game and CD Projekt Red's management attempting to cover it up became even more apparent when, during their quarterly stockholders call, it was stated that the game actually ran better than expected on those consoles, which tells us that, as horrendous as the game's performance was on last-gen consoles, they refused to come clean. In fact, the corporate executives, specifically Adam Kaczynski, actually directly lied to their own investors. Now, that came about from a question from one of the investors who asked, "The game has been not presented on basic, not pro consoles, PS4 and Xbox One so far. What is the performance of the game on this machine?" To which Adam Kaczynski replied, "Of course, a bit lower than on pros, but surprisingly good. I would say for such a huge world, so bit lower but very good." That's the answer. As a result of the backlash, CD Projekt Red issued a statement in which they stated during the first sentence, "We would like to start by apologizing to you for not showing the game based on last-gen consoles before it premiered and, in consequence, not allowing you to make a more informed decision about your purchase." And towards the end of their statement, they invited unhappy players to refund the game through either the PlayStation Network or Xbox refund systems, and if refunds are not possible for players, they should email CD Projekt Red at the provided email address. This seems to have taken Sony by surprise, and indeed this flew in the face of Sony's own refund policies, where they state that if a player so much as downloads the game, they are not eligible for a refund. But since then, Sony has decided to remove the game from the PlayStation Store and have decided to provide refunds to all whom will seek them. The CD Projekt Red then announced that this action by Sony was taken after CD Projekt Red's discussion with them. This was further reinforced by the company posting an investor report stating the same. However, that as well might not be entirely accurate or truthful. This came from VideoGamesChronicle.com, where it's been stated that Adam Badowski, CD Projekt Red's studio head, was liking several tweets of people being critical of Sony for their decision to pull the game from their store. Which makes one wonder, if this was a decision that was made in conjunction with Sony, why would an executive at CD Projekt Red be behaving in such a manner? It would seem that Mike Rose, full disclosure, Mike Rose and myself have not had the most cordial history with each other. However, his reasoning here I found to be sound, where he states, "A lot of people seem to be misunderstanding why Cyberpunk was removed from the PlayStation Store, while other buggy games haven't. The CD Projekt have been telling people for a week now to seek refunds from PlayStation, which goes against PlayStation policy, which will have super pissed Sony off. So it's very likely that the day CD Projekt started telling people to go ask for refunds, Sony were immediately in touch with them saying, 'We need to take your game off the store if you're telling people to get refunds,' and CD Projekt Red have then slowly, reluctantly agreed. I don't know this for certain, of course, but it's the likely turn of events. The big no-show here is CD Projekt Red telling players to A, go against PlayStation policy, and B, overwhelming PlayStation support without talking to PlayStation first. So there is an already established pattern of lies and lies of omission surrounding this game, and they continue to grow, and this is not only harming gamers, but it has severely harmed CD Projekt Red's stock prices, which saw a rise leading up to the game's release, only to see it fall off of a cliff. And along with this, we're seeing potential legal action being taken against CD Projekt Red. Now, a few days ago, it was reported on NintendoSmash.com that the Warsaw-based lawyer Mikołaj Orzechowski, again apologies if I'm mispronouncing that, has announced plans to file a class action lawsuit against CD Projekt Red. Now, in his statement, he had the following to say. In connection with recent events, and in particular the suspension of the sale of the product Cyberpunk 2077, we are currently analyzing, together with the law firm's team, the grounds for filing a class action together with filing a notification of the possibility of committing a crime under Article 286 of the Civil Code, misleading in order to obtain a financial benefit. The article from Nintendo Smash continues on to state, at the last meeting with investors, representatives of CD Projekt Red admitted that the company literally deceived representatives of Sony and Microsoft so that they let raw Cyberpunk 2077 builds go through control. So now we have CD Projekt Red lying to their customers, lying to their investors, and lying to Sony and to Microsoft. But unfortunately, it doesn't end there. We still have the mess over at GOG to cover. Now, in the spring of 2019, the Taiwanese developer Red Candle released the game titled Devotion. Contained within that game was a bit of an Easter egg, a Taoist talisman that had the words Xi Jinping, Winnie the Pooh in ancient Chinese writing, a reference to an old internet meme that resulted in Winnie the Pooh being banned in China and Chinese censors scrubbing meme images from the internet, or I should say the Chinese internet. Also contained within the talisman were the words that translate to, "Your mother is a moron," apparently a widely spoken insult in Taiwan. Red Candle apologized at length due to the Chinese outrage that resulted from the image, which seemed to do little to mollify negative sentiment, and 1 week after the game was released on Steam, the developers pulled Devotion for what they claimed to be for unspecified fixes, and since then it has remained unavailable on that platform. Recently, GOG, which is owned and operated by CD Projekt Red, had decided to list the game on that storefront. After GOG made that announcement on Twitter, that posting was apparently flooded by thousands of Chinese accounts, outraged over the announcement and demanding the game would be removed, which GOG complied, stating, "Earlier today it was announced that the game Devotion is coming to GOG. After receiving many messages from gamers, we have decided not to list the game in our store." This has resulted in gamers the world over being outraged at GOG succumbing to the will of China and the Chinese Communist Party, preventing gamers in other less authoritarian countries from being able to purchase and play the game simply because China, or rather Xi Jinping, has a stick up their asses over an internet meme that is already 7 years old. And the reason why people are upset at GOG and CD Projekt Red? Well, that's simple. Because they made a decision for every gamer the world over to not be allowed to play a game because of pressures from a single communist country. By doing this, they are allowing a brutal authoritarian regime to dictate censorious actions that affect people where they should have no control whatsoever. And they did so specifically in order to protect their monetary interests within that country. You know, The sad thing is, I actually like Cyberpunk 2077. I completed my first playthrough in about 51 hours, and I know there is a great deal of content that I have yet to finish. It's buggy, the perk system allows for handguns to be the most powerful weapon in the game, the crafting system is relatively simplistic yet functional, I'm constantly having to save and reload in order to clear glitches that have prevented me from hacking, prevented me from moving, prevented me from firing, and even during the final segments of the game, refused to allow me to cycle through dialogue options until I reloaded, allowing me to only select whichever one was highlighted first. The AI is quite sad and rather weak. You can literally breeze through most engagements simply by using the quick hack system to force enemies to kill themselves, and with the proper perks and weapon mods, handguns can do a startlingly large amount of damage, particularly with headshots. The game itself is in severe need of patching, even on PC, and yes, I fully acknowledge they are working on it, releasing a 9GB patch for the game on PC just the other day. And despite all that, I do enjoy the game. I think it's fun to play, I enjoy the characters, and there are a large number of side missions that I found to be thoroughly enjoyable. But the difficulty here is that CD Projekt Red management lied. Repeatedly and often, they lied to gamers by obfuscating the issues of the game on consoles. They compounded that lie by making certain that visuals and early reviews were all of a controlled nature, deliberately misleading the consumer. They lied to their investors. They lied to Sony and to Microsoft to even get the game out onto those storefronts. And they're allowing the Chinese to dictate to us what games we can or cannot play. And I get why so many people are outraged over the Cyberpunk 2077 component. The CD Projekt Red was seen by many to be the last bastion of consumer-friendly content. The Witcher 3 reinforced that impression on people, what with them only charging money for larger DLC content, providing I think it was 16 DLC packages completely free. The CD Projekt Red was the gaming golden boy that could seemingly do no wrong. A privileged position that Bethesda had once held, despite their also consistently pushing buggy and fundamentally flawed games out the door, quite often never to be fully patched. And now, the shine has come off the apple in one fell swoop, as opposed to the gradual buildup as we saw with Bethesda that culminated in the disastrous Fallout 76. BioWare was once an industry darling as well until Electronic Arts got their hands on it and the people that made BioWare great are no longer there. We saw the same thing with Blizzard and their downward spiral once Activision got its hooks into them. The moral of this story, dear viewer, is this. Video games are a creative endeavor that require as much creative passion as they do technical skill. The large issue is that creative endeavors do not do well under the umbrella of the corporate need to generate profit. If it's one thing that I see time and time again is that a publicly traded company will focus on profit at the expense of quality, and in the case of CD Projekt Red, at the expense of the truth and of respect. The CD Projekt Red refused to listen to their own developers who are themselves angered over this situation, pushing ahead for a release window where the game was nowhere near ready for launch. And as a result, any faith and goodwill they might have had has now been completely obliterated for a great many gamers out there, and with good reason. You do not lie to your customers, and you do not mislead them into purchasing a substandard product that you know full well is a giant pile of shit. Welcome to the Corpo Rats, CD Projekt Red. I hope you enjoy your stay. Once again, ladies and gentlemen, I am SidAlpha. I'll see you next time.